Good morning. My name is James Earls. Some of you may have not met me yet, but I'm relatively new here. Sam and I moved here in October. She is the daughter of Royce over here, who spoke with us last Sunday about chapter 1 and 6. And I'm thankful for the opportunity. Jesse asked me to do this lesson this morning, and I told him yes before I really thought through it. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so if I get ahead of myself or if I say something that doesn't make any sense, shoot a hand up, because sometimes I start talking too fast and I get ahead of my brain and I skip 2 or 3 words. So, we are going to start with chapter 7 this morning, but that's not where we're going to begin, because chapter 7 is an important chapter in this book. We're going to go ahead and start in chapter 1. So over the last 6 chapters, we've seen Solomon talk about probably what most would consider his favorite word in this book, vanity. He does chapter 1 and 2. It's probably the most depressing chapters you can read in the Bible. He talks about how nothing that we do in this world is worth anything. And you know, that's not a popular thing to hear nowadays. We have a culture that's based around doing things, acquiring things, collecting things. I know I have 2 or 3 collections myself. Probably should cut back on those, but all the things that we do, society tells us we need to get more, do more, be more. But that's not what Solomon's saying. He's saying all of that is meaningless. He had it all. I think it was Wolfgang talked about how much money he brought in, how many tons of gold and silver every year he had. I did the math. It was close to $100 billion. $100 billion a year Solomon got just in taxes and people paying tribute to him from other countries. He had it all. Anything he could imagine, anything he could have wanted, he had hold of it. And he said it was all for nothing. He moves to chapter 3. He talks about how everything has its time. Chapter 3, verse 20. He reminds us that in all this vanity, we all end up in the same place. He says, all go to one place, all are from dust, and to dust all return. All these things that we're collecting, all these things that we do, all these people we meet, one day are going to be either buried in the ground, or lost, or forgotten, or consumed, burned up. It's all going away once we die. We can't keep any of it for ourselves. So what's the point, right? He continues on, though. He doesn't give us a break. He keeps going with this theme. Chapters 5 and 6. He does take a break in chapter 5 at start to remind us that the only good thing we could do is to fear God in all of this, because He's the only one who's not subject to this vanity. And Wolfgang reminded us, too, when he did chapter 3, that while Solomon doesn't mention it here, you know, as Christians, we're not necessarily subject to the confines of the life we live here on earth, right? You know, it's not all hope is lost just because everything we do here is meaningless for our future. Our spirit continues on afterwards in Christ. We still have that hope. And even after death, you know, the people that you are around in life, the people you talk to, the people you spent time with, that has the ability to carry on even after all that you've done and all that you've acquired is put up for vanity, as Solomon lobbies. So after these 6 chapters of doom and gloom, Solomon finally shows a little bit of light, a little bit of progress. We shift a little bit of the attention, and he starts talking about vanity and wisdom. So we're still on the same Same page of a little bit of doom, but now we got a little bit of hope too. He's given us some advice. So, starting in chapter 7, verse 1. I'm going to begin, really, not even in verse 1. We're going to start with some true and false, okay? You guys don't have to answer out loud. You can write it down if you want to, but I'm not collecting these afterwards. There's no grade, okay? So, first question, true or false? I like laughter better than crying. Okay? Number 2, I like weddings better than funerals. True or false? I like thinking of my birthday better than the day I'm going to die. True or false? I like compliments better than criticism. That was an easy one for me. Number 5, I like shortcuts better than the long way around. Okay, so how many of you answered true for all of these? All right, at least a few of us. Well, that's good. That means a few of you answered false for at least one. And that means that according to Solomon, you are a wise man or woman. If you answered false for any of these, you qualify for wisdom. So Solomon, it seems a little backwards, right? He starts talking about all this doom and gloom, and he's like, okay, you can have wisdom. And all the things that we would want are the things that are not wise, or the things that he thinks are less wise. So it's only natural, right, to want these things, to like laughing better than crying, to enjoy weddings better than funerals. But it's not necessarily just about what we want. He's trying to give us a blueprint on how we can become more wise. Solomon was blessed with wisdom from God. He didn't acquire it for himself, but in both Proverbs and pretty much all the books he wrote, he tries to leave some type of guide for the children of Israel, for his sons after him, so that they can have some kind of idea of how they can move forward and be wise like he was, even though he made some bad choices. All right. So with this, we're going to go ahead and start into the actual text. Royce, you want to read for me verses 1 through 8?
A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and the bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit.
Thank you. All right, so here we see some of those things I was talking about just a minute ago with the true and false. But it kind of seems like a random collection of things right here, doesn't it? He seems to talk about a lot. What in the world is his focus? I had to read this 5 or 6 times at least before I could try to figure something out. But I kept feeling like this was a little bit of like Hebrews, when they're talking about things are better than. I think that's what he's going for here. He's not saying that it's wrong to own, he mentions precious ointment specifically here, perfume, to go to a house of feasting, to laugh, to go to a house of mirth, a house of joy. He's not saying these things are wrong. He's not saying you shouldn't do them or you shouldn't enjoy them. But what he's telling you is that sometimes it's better for you to not do those things, to do something else. Sometimes there's more value in the thing that is less fun, it's not as enjoyable. Verse 1, he says, better than. A good name is better than precious ointment. Verse 2, It is better to go to the house of mourning. Verse 3, he says, sorrow is better than laughter. Might not be more fun, though. I know to me it's not. And verse 5, it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear songs of fools. These are like his cliff notes to his sons to learn how to do better, to be better than he was. So let's start with verse 1. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death is better than the day of birth. I added better there, sorry. Day of death is than the day of birth. Good name's better than precious ointment. I don't know if you guys remember. I think it was Jesse, you talked about precious ointment in one of your lessons or one of your sermons. I can't remember which. But back in the winter, Jesse talked about how the ointment, the precious ointment that Mary Magdalene used to anoint the feet of Jesus before he was crucified, and how much that was worth. It's generally agreed on by scholars that ointment of that worth, of that value, was usually worth about a year's wages. So it'd take you everything you worked for a year to be able to buy just a little jar of that oil. So to bring that to our world, right? What's a year's wages? Well, the average yearly wage or yearly income for a household in the U.S. is $97,962. Let's go ahead and round up to 98. And for the sake of argument, I took liberty and I added an extra $2,000 just so I could say, let's list off 100 things that you could, or not 100 things, 5 things we can buy for $100,000. Just to put that in perspective. One jar of ointment. So this is something you could hold in the palm of your hand, cost $100,000. Things that we could buy with $100,000. A house, a small house, maybe not in St. Augustine. maybe more towards Putnam County, a little further towards Bunnell. A Corvette. I've never driven a Corvette. See them every now and then driving around St. Augustine, but never got to drive one. Sounds fun. A yacht. Right here on the ocean, that'd be pretty nice. Go out for the weekend, just cruise around, do what you want. Nobody out there, just enjoy the sea. You could buy a 5-star African safari for 4 people. I don't even know what that would entail. 5-star African safari, though. You probably see all the animals. Shoot, you might even get a personal guide from somebody. I would hope so for $100,000. My personal favorite one, this is the one that really sunk it home for me. You could buy 40,000 avocados. 40,000 avocados. Or you could buy 1 jar of perfume. So that's what we're working with here in verse 1. Precious ointment. A good name is better than that. We've spent the last 6 chapters, Solomon's talking about how all is vanity. And that precious ointment's no good to you unless your loved ones use it to help bury you after you die, right? It's not going to be any good to you if you don't use it. It's just here and it's gone. And as soon as you use it, it is gone, right? It's something that's really temporary. Verse 2. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Now, I was sitting here racking my brain. What is a house of feasting? I don't think we have those anymore. Best I could come up with is a fellowship meal here at church. We're going to have one this afternoon, right? I would consider that a house of feasting. We're all going to be, I don't know if we're going to be under the pavilion or in the fellowship hall, but if we're in the fellowship hall, that would definitely be a house of feasting, right? We're all in there having a good time, eating some food, spending time together. That's what I'm picturing here when I see house of feasting. House of mourning, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Funeral home. No, I can't think of anything that qualifies for that in our society other than that. House of mourning is better than house of feasting. What do you think he means there? Anybody got any ideas?
I think if you read verse 3 with it, I don't get that about sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. This might be wrong. when you've lived long enough, you've seen some pretty bad times, and you've learned to appreciate all the more the good times.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't go through those bad times and those sad things and those trials in life, you don't appreciate as much the good times when you have them.
Right. And you're not really ahead of me. In my notes, it was really hard for me to separate verses 2, 3, and 4. They're just so similar in the way that he blocks them out, the way he's talking about it. Because if you go on, let's read verse 3 and 4. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness the face of the heart's made glad. And the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Now, house of mirth, I had to get even more creative with that one, because I've never experienced a house of mirth. We don't really have those in our world today. But my closest grasp of what I could get for house of mirth would be something like Disney World, right? You go to Disney World, everyone's having a good time, everyone's having fun. It's all about the excitement of being there, or any theme park really, but we're in Florida. Universal Studios, anything like that. House of mirth. So fellowship meal, Disney World. It's better to go to a funeral though. That's some hard choices right there. And I think you're right, Royce. I have learned more I haven't been to a lot of funerals, but you go to more the older you get. And I have learned more at the funerals I've been to than Disney World, or I wouldn't say fellowship meals because that's a special bracket, but Disney World for sure. You don't get a lot from that other than just the experience of being there, the happiness.
I think too, it's about the focus, like the house of pleasure and the house of feasting. It's all about you. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the house of mourning and those places, you're more focused on something other than yourself in that moment. And I think that's kind of Solomon's point in all of this. We've got to be focused on something outside of ourselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you guys couldn't hear, she said that the focus is really what it is here. That you're not focused on yourself. You're focused on somebody or something other than yourself. When you're at a house of mourning, you're paying attention to, the loved ones of the person who's died, or if you were that person, you're focused on, their life, how they impacted you, how they changed you. So it's about thinking about something other than yourself, taking yourself out of the equation and looking at it from a different perspective. It's really important.
Sometimes if all we worry about is finding the good things in life, we forget why we're really here. So that's what I think he's trying to do.
Did you cheat? Did you read the whole book? Because that's what Solomon's talking about here.
Sorry.
Man, Solomon's getting to it. He says, I had it all. I've done everything. And it doesn't mean anything if you're not spending your time doing what's important, He spent it all focused on himself. He didn't take any time for anybody else. Until he was too old to... Go ahead.
Probably, a wise person would seek to go to places where he will learn, where he can grow spiritually, and so forth, and then also make himself more cognizant of people that need your help, like encouragement, sick people.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it takes a lifetime to become a wise person and have a good reputation. Or you can ruin that in just a few seconds by something you say, where you go, and what people say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sure can. And I think he hit that right on the nose with verse 1. A good name is better. You can ruin that in a second, can't you? Sometimes it's okay for us to be sad too. You don't have to be happy all the time. It's okay to go to a funeral and be sad, cry, mourn, grieve. Those are all okay. It's not just about being happy. You don't have to be a happy person 24/7. And I've learned some things when I was happy, but man, I've learned way more about myself when I was sad. I work in the mental health field, so I see sad people every single day. And man, they don't beat around the bush. They know exactly what they've done or what they need, or they're very critical thinkers. All it takes is a little bit of sadness or a little bit of grief to spur that on. How many of you have been to a funeral and seen somebody turn their life around because of the funeral? You know, you see somebody's mom die, and they all of a sudden decide, you know what, I need to become a Christian, or I need to start living better because I haven't been. I can't tell you, I've seen at least 2 or 3. I think it's because of what Solomon's saying here. Sometimes it's better to think about things that are not of yourself. It's better to think about our place here on this earth and how temporary we are. Yes, ma'am.
You don't depend on God so much. You're not thinking that when you go through a bump in the road or something happens, you rely on God.
That's
you
true.
don't become independent. I don't need anything. I'm happy. I have all this money.
It is. It's human nature. It's human nature to feel like you're on top of the world when everything's going good. But the second we hit that bump in the road, we need God, and we know it. So, sorry to go back into the depressing part, for 3 and 4. And, all right, moving on to verse 5. Nah, hold on. I'm still happy with 4. So, some of my favorite Bible characters are the ones that I can relate to personally. That makes sense, right? So Job, talking about, he was actually one of those who, even when he had everything, he still didn't forget about God. Like you were talking, sometimes it's so easy to do, but he lost it all in, I would say, a matter of weeks, maybe not even that, maybe a matter of days. And he spent his time sitting there questioning, what he was doing, why he deserved it. You see, David had a lot of trouble. He's called a man after God's own heart, but he messed up quite a few times. Everyone goes to the David and Bathsheba. After that, he lost that baby. He begged and pleaded with God for months and months, asking for that baby to be saved. And when it wasn't, he moved on with his life. But he learned. And then God told him he would be haunted by that for the rest of his life. You see, Absalom come for the throne. He loses sons and daughters and more sons to all of that, to the rebellion. You see, Elijah, he's one of my favorites. Elijah is. He, like Job, experienced one of the most dramatic mood swings I've ever seen. Let's go look at Elijah in 1 Kings. I thought I had it written down. I think it's 1 Kings 19. Yeah, 1 Kings 19. So, setting up the stage for this one, Elijah had just had probably the best victory that any prophet has ever had, at least in this time, for sure. He just did the sacrifice against the competition versus the prophets of Baal, and just him all by himself. When he dug the trenches around the sacrifice and poured all the water on it, and the Lord still burned it up, consumed it. And then after that, the children of Israel rebelled against the prophets of Jezebel and prophets of Baal, killed them all. And now Jezebel is hunting him, right? Kill all of her prophets. She's going to probably be upset by that. So he's on the run. After that great victory, he's fallen so far. He's on the run, and he's talking to God. I'll start in chapter 19, verse, let's see, 9, verse 9. There he came to a cave and lodged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left. Just 2 or 3 days ago, he had won, right? He had beaten the prophets of Baal. And here he is, 2 or 3 days later, hiding in a cave, running for his life. Jesus also had some times where he was sad. You know, we see that in John chapter 11, the death of Lazarus. And when I read that, I'm never sure if he's sad for Lazarus or if he's sad for the people that he sees mourning Lazarus, because he knows Lazarus is coming back in the next 20 minutes, but they can't comprehend that yet. So verse 5 is talking about the same thing. It's just worded a little bit differently, maybe a little more cheerily. Verse 5, it's better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than the song of fools. We're talking about getting advice from our friends who are hopefully wise. Our friends who tell us, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be acting like that. You need to turn around. Verse 6, joy and laughter are very fun, but they're quickly gone. We see the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This is also vanity. I told you we weren't getting too far away from vanity. I know. So what does that mean for you guys, crackling of thorns under a pot? Nobody? Yeah, used to burn. It's dry. It's really brittle. What I was thinking about when I read this is back when I was in Boy Scouts. Have any of you been camping and grabbed a whole handful of pine needles, tossed them on a campfire? No? If you have, it's really fun. It lights up quick, big old burst of fire, and then it's gone, just like that. All you're left with is smoke and ash. Or if you haven't done that, lighter fluid on a grill. Same thing. Same concept here, right? We're talking about brief moments of fun and joy. And man, are they fun, but they don't give you, you're not left with anything. You don't have anything left to carry away from that. He's saying it's better to hear your friends scold you, get on to you, tell you shouldn't be doing something, or that you should be doing something and you're slacking, than to squirt some lighter fluid on the grill. Although it is fun. Verses 7. Truly, the oppression drives the wise into madness, and the bribe corrupts the heart. I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? You know, we in America, we like to pride ourselves in being the land of the free, and we can very clearly grasp what oppression means and how it would be constricting to, you know, our values and our lives, right? We fight every day to make sure that we keep that freedom. Verse 8 was a hard one for me. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Better is the end of the thing than its beginning. Does anybody have any ideas on this one?
There's an argument at the beginning.
Right.
It's friction,
Yeah.
and then the end.
That's a good one.
I always say this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And it's better to be over without here.
Yeah. The end of the argument's always better than the beginning, right? Anybody else got anything? I think, too, he's not just talking about things that are hard to go through, but the things that are good, too, right? So if we spend our lives never going through something, never letting things end, let's say we had something we were really looking forward to. Man, I can't wait to go to this trip to Disney World. I'm so excited. I can't wait to get there. And you get there, and it's the day, and it's happening. You get there, you go into the park, you start riding rides, but it never stops. You never get out. Does that sound like fun? It's okay. It's okay to be excited for the beginning of something. But, after the day is done, after you're done being at Disney World, you get to remember and enjoy all the things that you did that day. If you don't ever get out, you don't get that. You don't get to think back, man, I loved it when I ride this ride and that ride. When I got my photo with Mickey Mouse, you don't get any of that. Sometimes, even no matter how good something is, right? The thing that I was envisioning was my wedding. I was really excited to get married 2 years ago now. And, we'd been doing all the planning, all the arranging and stuff. It was the day of, and I was really excited. But it was over, and it was better when it was over than when it was happening. I had fun at the wedding, but the good part is the marriage, right? What comes after. It's not necessarily what you're so excited for. It's what you get after you go through it. You don't learn anything unless you complete something. I think that's a little bit of what he's talking about here. And like you said, sometimes things are bad to start with.
Go about the attitude of waiting on the Lord, then you see that.
Yeah, I think you're right. He said, going about just, waiting on the Lord. The end of it's always going to be better because when the Lord gets here, it's all going to be done. It's finished. We get to go to heaven.
It's almost like if you have a project,
Mm-hmm.
you have to plan for it, you have to make sure everything's in place for it. But once it's over with and everything's going to be done, it's just on the side.
Yeah. She's talking about, if you guys couldn't hear, she said, it's like when you get a project. It's the relief of when it's over. You're working through the project, you got all these things, but when it's over, it's so relieving to have it done. You've got it finished, you can take a breath. It's just like that. All right. Les, you want to read verse 9 for me?
Be not hasty in the spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools.
I didn't pick you because I thought you needed to hear that. Be not quick to anger. Okay, what's he talking about here? He's not saying it's wrong to be angry. Now, it's wrong to lose control of your anger, for sure. I mean, he's saying don't be quick to anger. Don't take it just on the fly. Don't react. He's saying you can be angry, but if you're in control of your anger, you're able to understand why you're angry, and you're able to not hurt people with your anger, whether it's physically or emotionally. You say something mean you didn't mean to say because you were angry. You got to maintain control of that anger.
I think also he's saying don't hang on to it.
Yeah, I agree. And you got right to my next point. Something I learned being in the mental health field is that the average duration of an emotion, any emotion, anger, sadness, happiness, you name it, the average duration of that emotion is 90 seconds, a minute and a half. So if you start feeling happy and you keep feeling happy, it's longer than a minute and a half, there's something going on that's either reminding you to be happy, you're either thinking about being happy or the thing is still happening, it's making you happy, or if you're sad, that thing that's making you sad, you just keep thinking about it. If you just thought about it and moved on, you'd be sad for sure, but it wouldn't last. The same thing with anger.
A fool will continually be angry until it gives way.
It's true. He will. And he won't let go of it either. keeps the grudge, even long after it's done with. So don't be quick to anger, but don't hold on to it either. Don't lose control either. All right, verses 10 through 13. I'm going to read here, and then we'll talk about them. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is the wisdom that preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. I think it's interesting here in 13, the way he says, who can make straight what he has made crooked? You know, God didn't make our life easy on purpose. Or if he does, it's very chosen why he does, right? Sometimes there's always going to be another thing you got to do. There's always going to be somebody throwing a wrench in the engine, making it not work. There's never anything you can do to control the things that happen to you in life. God has control of that. What you have control of, though, is how you react to those things. You can't make the thing straight that is crooked, right? That's what he's saying here. Someone gets hit by a car, you can't undo that. You can't prevent it. You can't stop it from happening. But what you can do is after it's done with, you can be prepared for what's next. Whether it's trying to prevent it in the future, setting up more safety, whether it's grieving with the loved ones. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider that God has made the one as well as the other, and so many that may not find out anything that will be after him. We've talked about death a lot today, because, Solomon. But it's always good here to remember to be thankful, for the joy that we have. I know every time I get up here, I try to remember to, when I'm saying a prayer in front of the church, I try to remember to thank God. Every time at home, I'm trying to remember to thank God, because we're truly blessed. I mean, I'm almost cold from the air conditioning, and it's not cold outside. So that's a blessing, to be able to have that be able to meet in this nice room here. In the day of adversity, consider that God has made one as well as the other. You guys remember what Jesus said? It rains on the just and the unjust. Yep. Sounds pretty similar. It's almost like Solomon had his wisdom given from God or somebody. The day of adversity is made by God just as well as the day of joy. I think Elijah probably could have heard this back when he had that day of joy, and then right after that he had the day of adversity. It wasn't something he could control, but he had to learn from God how to deal with it. Royce, you want to read for me 15 through 18? Yes.
Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this, and also not remove your hand from the other. For he who fears God will escape them all.
All right. So here we have Solomon talking about two things, really. It sounds to me like he's talking about, he's kind of closing up what he said in 14, talking about how, or 13 and 14, how you can't make straight what's crooked, and you can't blame God for the things that are going right or wrong in your life, because He's made one day as good as the other. And Solomon here uses the word my. So he's getting personal. He's talking about his life. He's saying in his vain life, maybe that's why he's saying vanity so much in these first 7 chapters. In his vain life, he's seen it all, and he says that there's people who are wicked who are going to be successful, and there's people who are righteous, who are good, who are going to get hurt.
When somebody's righteous and they pass away, and then there's wicked, and you say, why did God take this person?
Yeah.
He contributed to society, but this person didn't. And he's
Just
still
like
in
that.
this world. I don't know.
God's got a better plan than all of us. You know, it doesn't make sense for us to... we can't understand why He would let someone righteous die and someone wicked live, but He's got a plan, and He knows way better than we do.
So if you leave them here, there's a chance they'll run into someone.
That's a good point. That's a good point. For you guys that may or may not have heard that, she said He doesn't want them to perish because they still have a chance of being saved. And you know, that's right. That's a hard thing for us to hear too, because you know, you want your loved ones, your friends, the people who are more righteous to live longer and be with you longer. But He might be taking them in the chance that this other person who's wicked, and give them a few more years to turn it around. It's a very hard thing to hear. And my only note here, we're getting here towards the end. My only note for 20 and 22 was that this sounds a whole lot like the golden rule to me. Does it not? It's close. It's not exactly it. It's a little bit different than the way Jesus says it. It also sounds a little bit like Deuteronomy too. I think Solomon here might be trying to make his own reference to the book of Deuteronomy. Maybe not. And then verse 26 to the end, my only note is that Solomon married too many women. If you read that, it's pretty clear that he's got some personal issues there. Anybody got any thoughts on the last part of the chapter here before I close up? All right. Well, thank you guys for letting me talk to you.